The gun pressed against Lena Carter's temple wasn't supposed to be there. Neither was she, bound to a chair in a warehouse that smelled of rust and blood, watching the man she loved choose between his empire and her life. Dominic Vale stood across from her, hands raised, eyes burning with a fury that could level cities. His enemies wanted surrender. They wanted the kingpin on his knees. What they got instead was a man willing to burn down everything he'd built for a woman who'd stumbled into his world by accident and stayed by choice. Welcome to a story of forbidden desire, deadly choices, and the kind of love that destroys kingdoms. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button, and let's begin where control ends and chaos takes over. Lena Carter believed in order the way some people believed in God, with unwavering faith and the quiet certainty that discipline would protect her from life's sharper edges. At 22, she had a plan: graduate nursing school at the top of her class, secure a position at County General, pay off her student loans before she turned 30. Maybe, eventually, find someone safe, someone predictable, someone who wouldn't disrupt the careful architecture of her future. She did not believe in accidents. She did not believe in fate. And she absolutely did not believe in men like Dominic Vale. The first time she saw him, Lena was carrying 3 grocery bags up the stairs to the apartment she shared with Maya Castillo, her roommate and closest thing to family she had left. It was late September, that transitional pocket of time when summer heat still clung to the evenings, but autumn had begun whispering promises of change. Lena had worked a double shift at the hospital where she was completing her clinical rotation, and her scrubs stuck to her back with sweat. Her feet ached. Her hair had escaped its ponytail hours ago. She was thinking about nothing except a hot shower and the leftover pasta waiting in the refrigerator. She wasn't thinking about the man standing in her living room. He stood with his back to her, speaking quietly into his phone in a voice that carried the kind of authority that didn't need volume. Tall, easily 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit like it had been tailored specifically to intimidate. Dark hair, perfectly styled. Posture that suggested military training or something equally disciplined. Everything about him radiated control, from the precise angle of his stance to the way he held the phone like it existed only to serve his purposes. Maya looked up from the couch, her expression sheepish. "Lena, you're home early. This is my brother Dominic. Dom, this is Lena, my roommate I told you about." Dominic turned, and Lena felt something shift in the air between them, something she would later recognize as the exact moment her carefully constructed life began to fracture. He had the kind of face that didn't need symmetry to be devastating. Sharp jawline, shadowed with stubble. High cheekbones. A mouth that suggested cruelty and sensuality in equal measure. But it was his eyes that caught her, storm gray and utterly assessing, taking her in with an intensity that felt almost physical, not leering, not even particularly interested, just measuring, like he was calculating her worth in some equation she didn't understand. "Lena." He said her name like he was testing its weight. His voice was low, textured with gravel and smoke. The phone disappeared into his pocket with practiced efficiency. "Maya speaks highly of you." "Does she?" Lena managed, hating the way her voice came out slightly breathless. She set the grocery bags on the counter with more force than necessary, using the movement to break eye contact. "She's never mentioned you." "Haven't I?" Maya's laugh sounded nervous. "Dom's been overseas business. He just got back." "What kind of business?" The question came out before Lena could stop it, sharper than she'd intended. Dominic's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of the challenge in her tone. "Import and export. Logistics. Nothing that would interest a nursing student." The way he said it made her think he knew exactly how much it would interest her, which was not at all. Lena had grown up in the kind of neighborhood where men in expensive suits meant trouble, and men who spoke in careful evasions meant worse. She'd spent her entire adult life building walls between herself and that world. She wasn't about to let them crumble now, no matter how compelling his eyes were. "Probably not," she agreed coolly, moving toward her bedroom. "Nice to meet you, Dominic. Maya, I'm going to shower. Let me know if you need anything." She felt his gaze follow her across the room like a physical touch, but she didn't look back. It took every ounce of discipline she possessed. In the shower, Lena stood underwater hot enough to burn and tried to make sense of her reaction. She'd met attractive men before. She'd even dated a few, though never seriously enough for them to threaten her focus. But something about Dominic Vale had gotten under her skin in the span of 30 seconds, and she didn't like it. Didn't like the way her pulse had jumped when his eyes met hers. Didn't like the curiosity curling in her chest about what exactly import and export meant when spoken by a man who moved like violence was always an option. When she emerged 20 minutes later in sweatpants and an old university hoodie, he was gone. Maya sat alone on the couch, staring at her phone with an expression Lena couldn't quite read. "Your brother seems intense," Lena said carefully, settling into the armchair across from her. Maya's laugh was hollow. "That's one word for it." She looked up, her dark eyes troubled. "Lena, I need to tell you something about Dom, about our family." But before she could continue, her phone buzzed. Maya glanced at the screen and her face went pale. "I have to go. Family thing. I'll be back later, okay?" She was gone before Lena could ask what kind of family thing required that level of urgency at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. The apartment felt suddenly too quiet, too empty. Lena tried to study. She had an exam on cardiac pathophysiology in 3 days, but the words swam meaninglessly across the page. Her mind kept returning to storm gray eyes and the dangerous curve of Dominic Vale's almost smile. She didn't see him again for 2 weeks. In that time, Lena almost convinced herself she'd imagined the intensity of their brief encounter. Almost convinced herself that Maya's odd behavior, the hushed phone calls, the late-night disappearances, the way she flinched at unexpected noises, had nothing to do with her brother. Almost. The second time she saw Dominic, Lena was leaving the library at midnight after a brutal study session. The campus was mostly deserted, just a few scattered students hurrying toward the dorms. October had arrived with teeth, bringing wind that cut through her jacket and made her regret not calling for a rideshare. But she only lived 6 blocks away, and she was trying to save money. She could walk. She made it 4 blocks before she realized she was being followed. The footsteps behind her were too measured to be casual, too persistent to be coincidental. Lena's heart began to hammer against her ribs. She'd taken self-defense classes. She kept her keys threaded through her fingers like a weapon. But theory and practice were very different things, and the street was dark and empty and suddenly felt much longer than 6 blocks. She turned the corner onto her street and heard the footsteps quicken. Her apartment was still 2 blocks away. Too far. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, trying to decide who to call: campus security, 911, Maya. When a car pulled up beside her. A black SUV with tinted windows, expensive and ominous in the streetlight. The back window rolled down and Dominic Vale looked out at her with an expression of mild irritation. "Get in." Lena's instinct was to refuse, to keep walking, to trust in statistics in populated areas, and the basic assumption that strange men in black SUVs were exactly the kind of danger she'd spent her life avoiding. But the footsteps behind her were getting closer, and Dominic's eyes held a promise that looked strangely like protection. She got in. The interior smelled of leather and something darker, gunmetal and expensive cologne, and a hint of danger that made her pulse race for entirely new reasons. Dominic sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The driver, a man built like a weapon, with scars and cold eyes, pulled smoothly into traffic. "You were being followed," Dominic said. Not a question. A statement of fact delivered in that same low, controlled voice that seemed to fill all the empty spaces in the car. "I noticed." Lena's hands were still shaking. She clasped them together in her lap, hating the display of weakness. "How did you know?" "I've had someone watching you." He said it casually, like it was a perfectly reasonable thing to admit. "Marcus, 3 cars back. Gray sedan." Lena twisted to look out the rear window, catching a glimpse of the vehicle in question before it turned down a side street. When she looked back at Dominic, her shock had crystallized into fury. "You've been having me followed. What the hell gives you the right—" "Your roommate is my sister." His eyes never left hers, storm gray and utterly unapologetic. "That gives me the right to ensure her environment is secure. You're part of that environment." "I'm not a security threat. I'm a nursing student. I spend my days learning about renal failure and medication interactions." The most dangerous thing I do is mix up normal saline with lactated ringers. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. You're also a woman living in a neighborhood with a rising crime rate, who walks home alone at midnight 3 times a week. That makes you vulnerable. Vulnerability attracts predators. And what are you? The question came out quieter than she'd intended, weighted with something she didn't want to examine too closely. Dominic leaned back against the seat, still watching her with that unsettling intensity. I'm the thing predators are afraid of. It should have sounded ridiculous, melodramatic. Instead, it sounded like a promise carved from stone and reinforced with blood. Lena believed him completely, which terrified her almost as much as the man who'd been following her in the dark. Where are we going? She asked, suddenly aware that they'd passed her street 2 turns ago. Your apartment. The long way. Dominic pulled out his phone, typed something rapidly. Marcus will stay outside tonight. Make sure your shadow doesn't come back. I don't need a bodyguard. You do. He looked up from the phone, and something in his expression made her breath catch. But I understand the instinct to refuse protection. It feels like admitting weakness. It's not. It's admitting that some threats require more than good intentions and pepper spray. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her independence and her carefully constructed boundaries and all the rules she'd built her life around. But the truth was, she'd been genuinely frightened out there in the dark. And Dominic Vale, with his bodyguards and his black SUVs and his absolute certainty, represented a kind of safety she'd never experienced before. It also represented danger of an entirely different sort. Why does Maya need watching? She asked instead. What kind of business are you really in, Dominic? The car pulled up in front of her building. Through the window, Lena could see the gray sedan Marcus had mentioned taking up position across the street. Dominic reached past her to open the door, his arm brushing against her shoulder with a contact that felt deliberate. The kind where vulnerabilities get exploited, he said quietly. The kind where people I care about become targets. Maya chose to distance herself from that world. I respect her choice, but I won't let her pay for my mistakes. And me? What am I in all this? He looked at her then with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between regret and hunger, and a calculation so complex she couldn't begin to parse it. You're the variable I didn't account for, the one thing in Maya's life that I can't control or predict or safeguard through conventional means. Because I'm not part of your world. Because you're exactly the kind of person my world destroys. He held her gaze for a moment longer, then nodded toward the door. Get some sleep, Lena. Marcus will be here until morning. She should have left then. Should have climbed out of the car and returned to her ordinary life and her careful plans and her faith in discipline over chaos. But something made her pause with her hand on the door handle. Thank you, she said quietly. For tonight. For making sure I got home safe. Dominic's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A crack in that perfect control, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. Don't thank me. Everything I do has a price. You just haven't figured out what you're going to pay yet. It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it sounded like a warning wrapped around something that felt dangerously close to desire. Lena got out of the car and walked into her building without looking back. But she felt his eyes on her the entire way, heavy as a brand and twice as permanent. That night, she dreamed of storm-gray eyes and choices that couldn't be unmade. The next morning, Maya was waiting in the kitchen with coffee and an expression that meant serious conversation. Lena had learned to read her roommate's moods over the past year. Maya was usually bright and effortless, the kind of person who made friends everywhere she went. But this version of Maya, the one with shadows under her eyes and tension in her shoulders, was someone different. Someone Lena was beginning to suspect she'd never really known at all. Dom told me about last night, Maya said without preamble. About the guy following you. Lena poured herself coffee, using the familiar motion to buy time. He also told me he's been having me watched. That was a fun surprise. I asked him to. Maya's voice was small, apologetic. After everything that happened with Marcus Antonelli, I got paranoid. I thought if Dom's people were keeping an eye on the building, you'd be safer. Who's Marcus Antonelli? Lena settled into the chair across from her, cradling the warm mug between her palms. And what happened? Maya was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee like it held answers to questions she didn't want to ask. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled, the kind of control that came from practice, from years of hiding truth beneath pleasant surfaces. "My family isn't what I told you," she began. "When I said my parents were an import and export, that was technically true, but it's not the whole truth. The Vales we're a crime family, Lena, one of the oldest on the East Coast. My father built an empire on smuggling, extortion, and violence. Dominic inherited it when Dad died 5 years ago." The word should have shocked her, should have sent her running to pack her bags and find a new apartment and return to the safe, predictable life she'd been building. But Lena found that some part of her had already known, had recognized the danger in Dominic's eyes and the way he moved through the world like he owned it, had felt the truth in the weight of his presence and the casual way he'd admitted to having her followed. "Okay," she said carefully. "And Marcus Antonelli?" "A rival. Someone who thought he could get to Dom through me." Maya's hands tightened around her mug until her knuckles went white. "He followed me for weeks, sent messages, made threats. Dom found out and—" She trailed off, but Lena could fill in the blanks. Whatever Dominic had done, it had been final. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lena asked. "I've been living here for a year, Maya, a year of thinking you were just this normal girl with a normal family, and all this time, would you have moved in if you'd known?" Maya's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Would you have wanted anything to do with me if I'd started with, 'Hi, my brother's a crime lord and there's a non-zero chance you could get murdered in the crossfire?'" The honest answer was no. Lena wouldn't have. She would have politely declined and found somewhere else to live and never looked back. But that hypothetical felt distant now, academic. The reality was that she had moved in, had built a friendship with Maya, had felt something dangerous and compelling when Dominic Vale looked at her with those storm-gray eyes. "I don't know," Lena admitted, "but I deserved the choice." "You're right. I'm sorry." Maya reached across the table, her hand finding Lena's. "I'm so sorry. I thought if I kept you separate from that world, if I never brought it into our apartment, you'd be safe, protected. But Dom says the Antonellis are pushing back, testing boundaries. That guy last night might have been random, or he might have been reconnaissance." "Reconnaissance for what?" "For whether you're important to me, whether you could be used as leverage." Maya's voice cracked slightly. "Dom's enemies are always looking for weaknesses. People we care about become targets." Lena thought about Dominic's words in the car. "You're the variable I didn't account for. The one thing in Maya's life that I can't control or predict or safeguard through conventional means." She thought he meant because she was an outsider, but maybe he'd meant something else entirely. "I'm not going to be used as leverage," Lena said firmly. "I'm not going to become a victim in some gangster drama, and I'm sure as hell not going to let fear dictate my life." Maya's smile was sad and knowing. "That's exactly what Dom said you'd say. That's why he assigned Marcus to permanent watch duty. He thinks you're too stubborn to be properly afraid." "Your brother doesn't know me well enough to make that assessment." "Doesn't he?" Maya tilted her head, studying Lena with sudden intensity. "He's been asking about you. What you study, where you work, what you do in your free time. I thought he was just being thorough, standard security protocol, but the way he talks about you, Lena, it's different, more interested than he should be." Something warm and dangerous unfurled in Lena's chest. She pushed it down ruthlessly. "I'm not interested in your brother. I'm not interested in any of this. I just want to finish school and become a nurse and live a normal, boring life." "I know. That's probably what he likes about you." Maya stood, taking her empty mug to the sink. "Just be careful, okay? Dom's world doesn't mix with normal. It consumes it, and he's the kind of man who always gets what he wants, even when he shouldn't want it in the first place." Lena wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she was immune to whatever dangerous charm Dominic Vale possessed. But she thought about the way her pulse had jumped when he'd leaned close to open the car door, the way his voice had wrapped around her name like possession, the crack in his control when she'd thanked him. She thought about the price he'd mentioned, the one she hadn't figured out yet. And she realized that Maya was right to warn her, because some part of Lena, some reckless, self-destructive part she'd spent years trying to suppress, wanted to know what it would cost. Wanted to step over the line she'd drawn between her world and his and see what happened when discipline met chaos. "I'll be careful," she promised, and tried to mean it. For 3 weeks, Lena kept her head down. She went to class, completed her clinical rotations, studied for exams. She saw Marcus's gray sedan parked across from her building every night and pretended it was normal. She ignored the way her heart jumped whenever she glimpsed someone tall with dark hair in her peripheral vision. She rebuilt her walls and reinforced her discipline and told herself that the night in Dominic's car had been an aberration. She almost believed it. Then Maya invited her to Sunday dinner at the Vale estate. "It's just family," Maya said, using the carefully casual tone that meant it was anything but. "Mom wants to meet you. She's been asking about the nursing student who keeps me sane. Besides, Dom will be there, and this way you can see he's not actually as terrifying as he seems." Lena suspected Dominic Vale was exactly as terrifying as he seemed, possibly more, but she also recognized a test when she saw one. Maya was offering her a choice: step further into this world, or retreat to the safety of ignorance. Accept what the Vales were, or walk away from the friendship entirely. "What's the dress code?" Lena asked, and watched relief flood Maya's face. "Semi-formal, nothing too fancy, just not sweatpants." The Vale estate sat 30 minutes outside the city, behind gates that looked like they could withstand a siege. The house itself was a sprawling Mediterranean villa, all stone and arches, and the kind of old money that came from generations of carefully managed crime. Lena felt desperately out of place in her simple black dress and second-hand heels, especially when a man in a suit, security, definitely security, opened the car door for her with the kind of deference usually reserved for dignitaries. Maya's mother, Sophia Vale, was elegant and gracious in the way of women who'd learned to smile through violence. She welcomed Lena with genuine warmth, ushering her into a dining room that could have seated 20 but was set for 6. There were other people there: Maya's younger brother Julian, who looked like a safer version of Dominic, and an uncle named Thomas who watched Lena with calculating eyes. And Dominic, standing by the window in dark slacks and a white shirt rolled to his elbows, looking like he'd stepped out of some dangerous fantasy Lena didn't want to examine too closely. He turned when she entered, and something in his expression shifted. Not quite surprised, but close. Like he'd expected her to refuse the invitation and was recalculating now that she'd accepted. "Lena." He moved toward her with that predatory grace, offering his hand. "I'm glad you came." His grip was warm and firm, and lasted just long enough to feel deliberate. Lena extracted her hand carefully, hyper-aware of Maya's knowing look and Sophia's interested glance. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Vale." "Sophia, please, and it's our pleasure." She gestured toward the table. "Come, sit. Dinner's ready, and I want to hear all about nursing school. Dominic tells me you're at the top of your class." Lena shot him a look. "You've been checking my academic record?" "I check everything about the people in my sister's life," he said smoothly, holding out a chair for her, the one directly across from his own seat she noticed. "Background checks are standard procedure." "How thorough are we talking?" She sat, accepting the napkin a server placed in her lap. "Did you pull my credit score too? Maybe check my social media history?" Julian laughed. "I like her. She's got spine." "Careful," Thomas murmured. Dominic doesn't like being challenged. But Dominic was smiling. Not the almost smile from before, but something genuine and unexpected that transformed his entire face. "On the contrary, Uncle, I find challenges refreshing. Most people are too afraid to push back." "Most people have the sense to be afraid of you," Maya pointed out, accepting a glass of wine from the server. Dinner was surreal. On the surface, it was perfectly normal. Good food, pleasant conversation, a family gathering that could have happened in any affluent household. But underneath ran currents of tension and unspoken history. The way Thomas and Dominic exchanged looks when discussing business opportunities. The way Sophia's smile tightened whenever anyone mentioned the Antonellis. The casual references to territorial disputes and strategic partnerships that sounded like corporate speak, but clearly meant something far more dangerous. And through it all, Lena felt Dominic's attention on her like a physical weight. He wasn't obvious about it, didn't stare or make inappropriate comments, but she could feel him tracking her reactions, cataloging her responses to each revelation about his world. After dinner, Sophia insisted on showing Lena the gardens. Maya went with them, leaving the men to their brandy and whatever discussions they had when women weren't present. The gardens were beautiful even in October, all structured hedges and carefully cultivated roses. "You're good for Maya," Sophia said, linking her arm through Lena's as they walked. "She's been happier this past year, more herself. I worry about her being out there alone, but knowing she has you makes it easier." "She's my best friend," Lena said honestly. "She's family." Sophia's smile was sad and knowing. Family is complicated for people like us. We love fiercely, but that love comes with costs, obligations, dangers. She paused by a fountain, watching the water catch the evening light. "Dominic asked me to talk to you, to explain what it means to be part of this world." "I'm not part of this world. I'm just Maya's roommate." "Are you?" Sophia's dark eyes, so like Dominic's, studied her carefully. "Because my son doesn't look at roommates the way he's been looking at you all evening, and he certainly doesn't run background checks on them or assign his best security to watch over them." Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Mrs. Vale, Sophia, and I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable, dear. I'm trying to warn you." She reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind Lena's ear with maternal gentleness. "Dominic is my son, and I love him. But I'm not blind to what he is. He's dangerous, possessive. Once he decides something belongs to him, he doesn't let go. And I see the way he's decided about you. He doesn't know me. We've barely spoken. He knows enough, and in this world, that's how it works. Fast, intense, consuming." Sophia's expression turned wistful. "I met my husband at a party. 3 days later, he told me I was going to marry him. I laughed, thought he was crazy. 6 months later, I wore white and promised forever to a man who terrified me as much as he fascinated me." "Did you regret it?" Lena asked quietly. "Every day, and not at all." Sophia squeezed her hand gently. "That's what loving a veil is like, Lena. It's beautiful and terrible and absolutely consuming. If you're smart, you'll run now, before he makes his move. Before you're in too deep to find your way out. And if I'm not smart, then we'll welcome you to the family, and I'll teach you how to survive it." They returned to the house to find the men in the study, surrounded by leather and old books and the scent of expensive cigars. Dominic looked up when they entered, his eyes finding Lena's with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Lena, could I speak with you privately?" It wasn't really a question, despite the phrasing. Maya started to protest, but Sophia touched her arm gently. "Let them talk, darling. Some conversations need to happen." Lena followed Dominic onto a terrace that overlooked the grounds. The October air was crisp, sharp, with the promise of winter. He handed her his jacket without asking, draping it over her shoulders with a possessiveness that should have annoyed her but instead felt oddly comforting. "My mother warned you away," he said, leaning against the railing. "Not a question, a certainty. She told me what it means to be with someone like you, the costs, the dangers. And?" Lena turned to face him, searching his expression for some sign of what he wanted from her. But Dominic's control was perfect, his face revealing nothing except the sharp intelligence in those storm-gray eyes. "And I should probably listen to her," Lena said quietly. "I should finish dinner, thank you for your hospitality, and never come back here. I should keep living my safe, predictable life and stay as far away from you as possible." "You should," he agreed. "That would be the smart choice." "But?" Dominic pushed away from the railing, moving toward her with that dangerous grace. He stopped close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with cigar smoke and something darker. Close enough that her pulse jumped and her breath quickened and every rational thought in her head scattered like leaves in wind. "But you're not going to make the smart choice," he said softly. "Because you felt it too. That night in the car. The way everything shifted when I touched you. The way the air changed when our eyes met. That's not—" But she couldn't finish the denial, because it was a lie, and they both knew it. His hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. "I don't believe in accidents, Lena, or fate, or any of the pretty lies people tell themselves about why they make reckless choices. But I believe in this, in whatever's happening between us. Nothing's happening between us. We're strangers who've had 3 conversations. Are we? His thumb traced her lower lip, and Lena's entire body went liquid. Because I know you wake up at 5:30 every morning to run 3 miles before class. I know you take your coffee black with 1 sugar, and you have a scar on your left knee from falling off your bike when you were 7. I know you haven't been home to see your grandmother in Iowa in almost 2 years because you're too proud to admit you can't afford the plane ticket. I know you're brilliant and stubborn and so fucking beautiful, it makes my chest ache. You have been checking on me. She should have been angry, should have been frightened by the depth of his surveillance. But all she felt was that dangerous warmth spreading through her chest, making her walls crack and crumble. I have. Because from the moment you walked into your apartment carrying those grocery bags, looking at me like I was a problem to be solved, I couldn't stop thinking about you. And I don't do that, Lena. I don't lose focus. I don't get distracted. My world doesn't allow for weakness. And you, his expression turned almost pained, you're the biggest weakness I've ever had. Then maybe you should let me go, before I become a liability. I should. His forehead dropped to rest against hers, and Lena's eyes fluttered closed. But I'm not that strong. Not when it comes to you. Dominic, have coffee with me. The request came out rough, almost desperate. Tomorrow. Somewhere public. Somewhere safe. Just coffee and conversation and a chance for you to decide if this, whatever this is worth the risk. Every instinct Lena possessed screamed at her to refuse, to step back, walk away, return to the life she'd built brick by careful brick. But she thought about Sophia's words, beautiful and terrible and absolutely consuming. She thought about the way Dominic looked at her like she was something rare and precious and worth burning the world for. She thought about the price he'd mentioned, the one she still hadn't figured out. And she made her choice. Tomorrow, she whispered, 10 o'clock, the coffee shop on 4th Street. Dominic's smile was slow and devastating and full of dark promise. Tomorrow. He kissed her then, just a brush of lips against her forehead, gentle and restrained and somehow more intimate than if he'd claimed her mouth. Then he stepped back, giving her space to breathe, space to retreat if she needed to. Lena didn't retreat. She stood there on the terrace wearing his jacket, feeling the ghost of his touch on her skin, and knew with absolute certainty that she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. Tomorrow, she would have coffee with Dominic Vale, and nothing would ever be the same. The coffee shop on 4th Street was exactly the kind of place Lena would have chosen for herself. Small, unpretentious, with mismatched furniture and the smell of fresh ground beans. She arrived 15 minutes early because punctuality was armor, a way to maintain control when everything else felt dangerously unstable. She ordered her usual black coffee with 1 sugar and claimed a table by the window where she could watch the street, where she could watch for him. Dominic arrived exactly at 10 because men like him didn't run late and didn't make excuses. He moved through the coffee shop like he owned it, drawing eyes without seeming to notice or care. He'd dressed down from the formal dinners and business meetings, dark jeans, a charcoal sweater, leather jacket, but somehow still managed to look like he'd stepped out of some expensive catalog. Dangerous and beautiful and completely out of place among the college students and freelance writers hunched over their laptops. He spotted her immediately, his expression softening in a way that made her chest tight. When he reached her table, he didn't sit right away, just stood there looking at her like he was trying to memorize the moment. "You came," he said quietly. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might wake up this morning and remember all the reasons this is a terrible idea." He pulled out the chair across from her, settling into it with that controlled grace. "I'm glad you didn't." A server appeared, young and clearly flustered by Dominic's presence. He ordered an espresso without looking at the menu, his attention never leaving Lena's face. When they were alone again, the silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with everything they hadn't said. "I need you to be honest with me," Lena said finally, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. "About what you want, about why you're here. I want to know you." Dominic leaned back in his chair, studying her with that unsettling intensity. "Everything. What makes you laugh? What keeps you up at night? Why you chose nursing when you're brilliant enough to do anything. I want to understand the woman who looked at me like I was a problem to be solved instead of someone to be afraid of. Most people are afraid of you for good reason. Most people should be. But you're not most people, are you, Lena? She took a sip of coffee, using the motion to buy time. I'm exactly like most people. I'm ordinary, predictable. I study hard, work my shifts, pay my bills. There's nothing particularly special about me. You're wrong. His voice was soft but absolute, leaving no room for argument. You're the daughter of addicts who decided to break the cycle. You put yourself through school working 3 jobs. You volunteer at a free clinic in one of the worst neighborhoods in the city because you believe everyone deserves care regardless of their ability to pay. You're loyal to the point of recklessness. You didn't run when you found out about Maya's family, even though any rational person would have. And you're here now, having coffee with a man you know is dangerous because some part of you wants to see what happens when discipline meets chaos. Lena's breath caught. You really did do a thorough background check. I told you, I check everything about the people in my sister's life. The server returned with his espresso, and Dominic accepted it with a nod. But I kept checking on you for entirely different reasons. Which are? He took a sip of his espresso, considering his words with the same careful precision he seemed to apply to everything. Because you fascinate me. Because I look at you and see something I didn't know I was missing. Because for the first time in my life, I want something I have no business wanting. And what is it you think you want? Dominic set down his cup, his storm gray eyes finding hers with an intensity that made the rest of the coffee shop fade away. You. Not as a possession or a trophy or some prize to be won. I want to know you, Lena Carter. I want to earn the right to make you laugh. I want to be the person you call when you've had a bad day. I want... He stopped, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that felt uncharacteristically uncertain. I want things I don't have words for yet. The honesty in his voice was devastating. Lena had expected charm, perhaps some calculated seduction. She hadn't expected this raw vulnerability from a man who seemed to have control down to an art form. I don't know if I can give you what you want, she said quietly. I don't know if I should. Your mother told me what it costs to be part of your world, Dominic. The violence, the constant danger, the knowledge that people you care about become targets. I've spent my entire life trying to build something stable, something safe. You're the opposite of safe. I am, he agreed. I won't lie to you about that. My world is brutal and unforgiving, but I can keep you safe within it. I can protect you in ways you can't even imagine. By having me followed? By running background checks and assigning bodyguards? Lena shook her head. That's not safety, Dominic. That's a cage with nicer bars. What if I told you I'd give it up? The words came out rough, like they'd been dragged from somewhere deep. All of it. The business, the territory, the empire my father built. What if I walked away from it entirely? Lena stared at him, searching for any sign that he was joking, but his expression was deadly serious, his eyes burning with something that looked almost desperate. You don't mean that, don't I? He leaned forward, close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. I've been running my father's empire for 5 years. 5 years of violence and strategy and constantly watching for the knife aimed at my back. I'm good at it. I've expanded our territory, strengthened our alliances, eliminated threats before they could take root. But I've never wanted it, Lena. Not really. I inherited a crown I never asked for, and I've worn it because someone had to, because walking away would have meant civil war among the families, because my mother and siblings needed protection. And now? Now I'm tired. Tired of the blood and the lies and the constant calculation. Tired of being the monster everyone expects me to be. His hand moved across the table, fingers brushing hers with tentative gentleness. And then you walked into my life, looking at me like I could be something more than what I am, like I could be better. It made me want to try. Lena's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. You can't just walk away from an empire because you met a girl you like. Can't I? A smile ghosted across his lips, sad and knowing. Watch me. Dominic, I'm not saying it would be easy. I'm not saying it wouldn't take time and careful planning and probably more violence before I could extract myself completely. But I've been thinking about it since the night I met you. exploring options, making contingencies. He turned her hand over, tracing the lines of her palm with his thumb. Maya got out. She built a life separate from our family's business. If she could do it, so can I. Maya didn't have an empire depending on her leadership. No, she just had me standing between her and everyone who wanted to use her as leverage. His grip on her hand tightened slightly. I can find someone else to take over. My Uncle Thomas has been angling for more power for years. Or I could engineer a merger with one of our allied families. The point is, it's possible. Difficult, but possible. Lena pulled her hand back, needing space to think clearly. This was too much, too fast. A week ago, she'd been a nursing student with a carefully planned future. Now she was sitting in a coffee shop while a crime lord offered to give up his empire for the chance to date her. "Why me?" she asked. "You could have anyone. Someone from your world who understands the rules, who wouldn't be shocked by what you do. Someone sophisticated and beautiful and— I don't want someone from my world." Dominic's voice was firm, absolute. I've been surrounded by that kind of person my entire life. Women who see the power and the money and want a piece of it. Who calculate their smiles and measure their words and play games I'm too tired to enjoy. You're real, Lena. You look at me and see a person, not a position. You challenge me instead of flattering me. You make me want to be better instead of just more powerful. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone you barely know. I know you better than you think, and I want to know you more. He signaled the server for another espresso, the gesture giving them both a moment to breathe. Tell me about Iowa, about your grandmother, about why you haven't been home in 2 years. It was a deflection, a way to ease the intensity of the conversation, but it was also an invitation, a chance for Lena to share parts of herself, to see if this connection was real or just chemistry and circumstance. So she told him. About growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, about her parents and their addictions, the revolving door of rehab and relapse that had defined her childhood, about her grandmother taking her in when she was 14, giving her stability and love and the belief that she could be something more than her circumstances. She worked 3 jobs to help me save for college, Lena said, her voice thick with emotion she usually kept buried. Cleaning houses during the day, waitressing at night, doing alterations on weekends. She never complained, never made me feel like a burden. When I got my acceptance letter to the nursing program, she cried, told me I was going to do important things. Why haven't you been back to see her? Lena's laugh was bitter. Pride mostly. She sacrificed so much to help me get here, and I can barely afford to feed myself. I work every shift they'll give me at the hospital, pick up catering gigs on weekends, tutor undergrads for extra cash. But after rent and tuition and books, there's nothing left. I can't afford a plane ticket to Iowa, and I'm too ashamed to tell her that. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle. What if I bought you a ticket? No. The refusal was automatic, sharp. I'm not taking your money, Dominic. Why not? I have more than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. Buying you a plane ticket wouldn't even register as an expense. Because I don't want to owe you. Because accepting that kind of help changes things between us. Lena met his eyes, needing him to understand. I've worked too hard to be independent, to not rely on anyone else for my survival. If I start taking things from you now, where does it end? You buy me a plane ticket, then maybe you offer to pay my rent, help with my student loans, and suddenly I'm just another person in your world who's been bought and paid for. Something flickered in Dominic's expression. Hurt, maybe, or recognition. Is that what you think would happen? That I'd try to own you through money? I think money is power, and you're used to having both. I think it would be easy to slip into that dynamic without meaning to. Lena's voice softened slightly. I'm not saying you'd do it maliciously, but I need to know that whatever this is between us, it's built on something more than financial dependence. Dominic nodded slowly, accepting her boundary even as she could see it cost him. All right, no money, but if you change your mind, if you ever need help, I'll ask. I promise. It was a small concession, but from the way his expression cleared, it meant something to him. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing more easily now that they'd navigated the harder terrain. Dominic asked about her classes, her favorite patients, the parts of nursing that excited her most. Lena found herself relaxing despite her better judgment, drawn in by his genuine interest and the way he listened like every word mattered. He was funny, she discovered, dry and subtle in his humor, but genuinely funny in a way that made her laugh without meaning to. He told her stories about Maya as a child, mischievous and fearless, about Julian's terrible attempts at cooking that had nearly burned down the estate kitchen twice, about his mother's insistence on family dinners, even during their busiest times. She says we need to remember we're people, not just chess pieces, Dominic said, a small smile playing at his lips, that we need moments of normalcy to anchor us. Is that what this is? Lena gestured between them. Your moment of normalcy? No. His smile faded, replaced by that intense focus that made her breath catch. This is my moment of insanity, of stepping outside everything I know and reaching for something I have no guarantee I can keep. This is me being reckless for the first time in my life. You don't seem like the reckless type. I'm not. Usually. He checked his watch, regret crossing his features. I have a meeting in an hour, business that can't be postponed, but I don't want to leave. Then don't. The words came out before Lena could stop them, surprising them both. Dominic's eyes darkened with something hungry and dangerous. If I stay, I'm going to want more time, more conversation, more of you. And I'm not sure either of us can afford that right now. Why not? Because I'm already in deeper than I should be. Because spending more time with you is only going to make it harder when you decide this is too much and walk away. He stood, pulling out his wallet. I've got it, Lena said quickly, reaching for her purse. Lena, I'm buying my own coffee, Dominic. That's non-negotiable. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, but let me at least walk you to your car. I don't have a car. I took the bus. Something shifted in his expression, concern mixed with frustration. Then let me drive you home. I'm perfectly capable of taking the bus back. I know you are, but I'd feel better knowing you got home safely. When she started to protest, he held up a hand. Not because I think you need protection, not because I'm trying to control your movements, but because I care about you, and this is something I can do. Let me do this one thing, Lena. Please. The quiet please broke through her resistance. Lena nodded, gathering her things. Dominic left cash on the table, enough to cover both coffees and a generous tip, she noticed, and guided her out with a hand at the small of her back that felt both possessive and protective. His car was parked half a block away, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Lena would make in 5 years. He opened the passenger door for her, waited until she was settled before closing it with careful precision. The interior smelled of leather and his cologne, intimate and overwhelming in the enclosed space. Where to? He asked, starting the engine. Lena gave him her address, then settled back against the seat. They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the city scrolling past the windows. She watched Dominic's hands on the steering wheel, strong and capable, and tried not to think about how they'd felt brushing against her skin. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Anything. That night you picked me up when I was being followed. How did you know? Marcus was watching the building, but you were there within minutes, like you'd been close by. Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I was at a restaurant 2 blocks from campus, business dinner that was running late. I saw your location on my phone. Wait, my location? Lena sat up straighter. You're tracking my phone? I have been since the night we met. He said it calmly, matter-of-factly, like it was a completely reasonable thing to admit. For your protection. Dominic, that's a massive invasion of privacy. It is, he agreed. It's also the reason I was able to get to you before whoever was following you could make a move. It's the reason Marcus knew exactly where you were when you took a different route home last Tuesday. It's the reason I can sleep at night knowing you're safe. Lena wanted to be angry, should have been furious at this violation of her autonomy, but part of her, the part that had felt genuine fear that night in the dark, understood his reasoning, even if she hated the method. I want you to stop, she said firmly. All right. She blinked, surprised by the immediate capitulation. Just like that? Just like that. He pulled the car to a stop at a red light, turning to face her. I don't want to control you, Lena. I want to protect you. But if the tracking makes you uncomfortable, I'll stop. I'll find other ways to ensure your safety, ways that don't violate your privacy. Like what? Like Marcus continuing to watch the building. Like me checking in with you regularly to make sure you're okay. Like you trusting me enough to tell me when something feels wrong. The light changed and he returned his attention to the road. I can't turn off the part of me that needs to know you're safe, but I can respect your boundaries while I figure out how to live with that need. It was more than Lena had expected, more compromise than she'd thought him capable of. She reached out, touching his arm lightly. Thank you. His hand covered hers briefly, warm and solid. Don't thank me yet. I'm still going to worry constantly and probably drive you crazy with my overprotectiveness. It's who I am. I'm starting to figure that out. They reached her building too quickly. Dominic pulled into a spot across from the entrance, putting the car in park but not moving to get out. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. I want to see you again, he said finally. Soon, as often as you'll let me. Lena knew she should say no, should establish boundaries and slow this down before it consumed everything. But when she looked at him, really looked at this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly vulnerable man, she couldn't find the words to refuse. Saturday, she heard herself say. I have the day off. We could, I don't know, do something normal, like normal people on a normal date. Dominic's smile was devastating. What do normal people do on dates? I have no idea. It's been so long since I had time for dating, I've forgotten the protocol. She unbuckled her seatbelt, reaching for the door handle. Surprise me. Just nothing that involves your business, nothing dangerous, something that's just you and me being regular people for a few hours. I can do that. He got out of the car, coming around to open her door before she could protest. Lena? Yeah? He looked at her like he was memorizing her face, his expression intense and tender in equal measure. Thank you. For giving this a chance, for not running when you should have. For seeing something in me worth the risk. Don't make me regret it, she said softly. I'll try not to. He didn't kiss her, didn't even touch her beyond offering his hand to help her out of the car. But the look in his eyes promised things that made her pulse race and her carefully maintained control crack just a little bit more. Lena made it to her apartment on shaking legs. Maya was at the kitchen table with her laptop, but she looked up when Lena entered, her expression knowing. So, Maya said. How was coffee? Complicated. Lena dropped into the chair across from her. Your brother wants to give up his empire for me. Maya's eyebrows shot up. He told you that? Is he serious, or is this just, I don't know, some line he uses? Dom doesn't use lines. He doesn't need to. Maya closed her laptop, giving Lena her full attention. If he said he'd walk away from the business, he means it. The question is whether you believe he can actually do it, and whether you want him to. Why wouldn't I want him to? If he left that world, we could have something normal, something safe. Could you? Maya's voice was gentle, but pointed. Because I left, Lena. I built a life completely separate from our family's business, but it didn't change who I am. It didn't erase the things I know or the way I see the world. Dom could walk away from the empire, but he'll always be a veil. He'll always carry that violence with him, even if he's not actively using it. Lena thought about Dominic's hands on the steering wheel, the controlled strength in every movement, the way he'd talked about protecting her like it was his purpose. You think I should end this now, before it goes any further? I think you should know what you're getting into, and I think you should be honest with yourself about whether you can handle it. Maya reached across the table, squeezing Lena's hand. I love my brother. He's brilliant and protective and more caring than he lets most people see. But he's also intense and possessive, and he's done things that would keep you up at night if you knew the details. If you're going to be with him, you need to accept all of that, not just the parts that fit your idea of who you want him to be. I don't know if I can. Then figure it out before Saturday, before this goes any further, because once Dom decides you're his, there's no halfway. It's all or nothing, and nothing isn't really an option he accepts well. That night, Lena lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's conversation. She thought about Dominic's offer to walk away from his empire, his vulnerability when he'd admitted to wanting things he had no words for, The way he'd respected her boundaries about the tracking while making it clear he couldn't stop worrying about her safety. She thought about her grandmother in Iowa, working 3 jobs to give her a chance at a better life, about the careful plans she'd made, the future she'd been building brick by disciplined brick, about the woman she'd worked so hard to become, independent, focused, in control. And she thought about how all of that felt suddenly insufficient, like she'd been building a life that was safe but small, protected but lonely. Like maybe discipline and control weren't armor at all, but walls that kept out danger and possibility in equal measure. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from an unknown number, though she knew exactly who it was. I stopped the tracking, but I'm still going to worry. Sleep well, Lena. She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed a reply. Worrying is allowed. Violating my privacy isn't. See you Saturday. His response came almost immediately, already counting the hours. Lena set the phone aside, a smile tugging at her lips despite everything. She was in trouble. Deep, complicated, dangerous trouble. And the terrifying part was that some reckless piece of her didn't care. She thought about Sophia's words at the estate. Beautiful and terrible and absolutely consuming. That's what loving a veil was like. And Lena was starting to understand exactly what that meant. Saturday, she would find out if she was brave enough or foolish enough to take that leap, to step over the line between her world and his, and see what happened when discipline finally met chaos. The choice should have been obvious. The smart move, the safe move, was to end this before it truly began. But as she drifted toward sleep, Lena found herself hoping she wouldn't be smart. Not this time. Because for the first time in her carefully controlled life, she wanted something more than safety. She wanted to know what it felt like to be consumed. Saturday arrived wrapped in unseasonably warm October sunshine, the kind of day that felt like a gift after weeks of gray skies and biting wind. Lena changed her outfit 3 times before settling on jeans and a soft blue sweater that Maya insisted brought out her eyes. She felt ridiculous, nervous in a way she hadn't experienced since high school, when every social interaction felt loaded with the potential for humiliation or triumph. Dominic texted at 9:30 to say he'd pick her up at 11. No details about where they were going, just a simple instruction to wear comfortable shoes and bring a jacket. Lena spent the intervening hour trying to study, but the words in her pharmacology textbook might as well have been written in Sanskrit for all the sense they made. Her mind kept drifting to storm gray eyes and the promise of something that felt dangerously close to surrender. When the knock came at her door, Lena's heart performed an acrobatic leap that should have been medically concerning. She opened it to find Dominic standing in the hallway wearing dark jeans, a black Henley, and a leather jacket that made him look like he'd stepped out of some dangerous fantasy. His hair was slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it, and the effect was devastating. "Hi," he said, and the simple word carried so much weight it nearly buckled her knees. "Hi yourself." Lena grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door, hyper-aware of Maya watching from the couch, with barely concealed amusement. "Where are we going?" "You said you wanted normal. I'm attempting normal." He offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Lena took it. His fingers laced through hers with easy confidence, warm and solid and somehow right in a way that terrified her. "Trust me?" It was a loaded question. Trust him with what? Her safety? Her heart? Her carefully constructed future? But Lena found herself nodding anyway, stepping into the hallway and letting him lead her toward whatever came next. The car ride took them out of the city, heading north along the coast road. Dominic drove with one hand on the wheel, the other still holding hers, his thumb tracing absent patterns against her palm that made concentration impossible. They talked about nothing and everything. Her week at the hospital, a difficult patient she'd helped treat, the exam she had coming up on cardiovascular disorders. He listened with that intense focus that made her feel like the most important person in his universe, asking questions that showed he actually understood the complexities of what she was learning. "You're passionate about it," he observed, glancing at her as they paused at a stoplight. "The way your whole face lights up when you talk about helping people. It's beautiful." Lena felt heat creep up her neck. "It's just what I do, what I've always wanted to do. It's more than that. It's who you are." The light changed, and he returned his attention to the road, but his grip on her hand tightened slightly. "You see suffering, and your instinct is to heal it. I see suffering and my instinct is to eliminate whoever caused it. We're fundamentally different that way. Are we? Lena turned to study his profile, the sharp lines of his jaw and the tension around his eyes. You protect the people you care about. That's a form of healing, too. That's generous. Most people would call it violence. Most people aren't sitting in your car holding your hand. She said it lightly, but the truth underneath was heavy. She was making a choice, consciously deciding to see him as more than the sum of his crimes. It should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt inevitable. They pulled into a parking lot overlooking the ocean, and Lena realized where they were. A small seaside town about an hour north of the city, the kind of place that existed primarily for summer tourists, but maintained a quiet charm in the off-season. The boardwalk stretched along the beach, dotted with closed carnival rides and shuttered food stands. Only a few were open: a coffee shop, an ice cream parlor, a place selling saltwater taffy. I haven't been to the beach in years, Lena said as they got out of the car. The salt air hit her immediately, sharp and clean and full of memory. My grandmother used to bring me to a place like this when I was little, before everything fell apart with my parents. Dominic came around the car to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. What happened? With your parents, I mean. You mentioned addiction, but you've never told me the whole story. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, staring out at the gray-blue expanse of ocean. She didn't talk about this, didn't let people close enough to ask. But something about Dominic's steady presence made the words come easier than they should have. My mom got hooked on painkillers after a car accident when I was 8, she said quietly. Started with a legitimate prescription, ended with her doctor shopping and stealing from relatives to feed the habit. My dad tried to help at first, but he was drowning in his own demons. Alcohol, mostly. They fed off each other's dysfunction until there was nothing left but the addiction and the chaos it created. How old were you when you went to live with your grandmother? 14. Child Services finally intervened after I missed 3 weeks of school because my parents forgot I existed. Grandma fought to get custody, worked with lawyers she couldn't afford, took parenting classes she didn't need. She saved me. Lena's voice cracked slightly. And I haven't been home to see her in 2 years because I'm too proud to admit I can barely keep myself afloat. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his hand finding hers again. What if we went together? What? To Iowa. To see your grandmother. He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. You said you can't afford the plane ticket. I can. And before you argue about taking my money, hear me out. I'm not buying you a ticket as charity. I'm asking to meet someone who's important to you. Someone who made you into the woman standing in front of me. Let me pay for both of us to go, as part of this, whatever this is we're building. Lena wanted to refuse on principle, but the longing to see her grandmother, to show her that she was okay, that the sacrifices had been worth it, that longing overrode her pride. She'll ask questions about who you are, what you do. I'll tell her the truth, that I'm a man trying very hard to be worthy of her granddaughter. His thumb brushed against her cheek, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. And that I'm failing most of the time, but I keep trying anyway. Dominic, let me do this, Lena. Please. Not because I think you need saving, but because some things are too important to let pride stand in the way. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Dominic pulled her into his arms, and Lena let herself lean into his strength, breathing in the scent of leather and cologne and ocean air. They stood like that for a long moment, the wind whipping around them, the waves providing a soundtrack to something that felt dangerously close to falling. When they finally pulled apart, Dominic laced his fingers through hers and tugged her toward the boardwalk. Come on, I promised you normal, and normal people don't stand in parking lots having emotional moments. They walk on beaches and eat overpriced ice cream and pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist. The boardwalk was mostly empty, just a few families and couples enjoying the unexpected warmth. They walked slowly, hands linked, stopping occasionally to peer into shop windows or watch the waves crash against the shore. Dominic bought them both ice cream from a parlor that had been operating since 1952, according to the faded sign. Lena got mint chocolate chip. He got black cherry, and then promptly stole bites of hers when she wasn't looking. This is nice, she said, licking her cone. Normal. Easy. Is it? Dominic's smile was slight, almost self-deprecating. I keep waiting for you to realize I have no idea what I'm doing, that I've never done this before. The dating thing, the trying to be normal thing. I take women to business dinners. I arrange encounters that serve strategic purposes. But this? He gestured between them. Walking on a beach, eating ice cream, just being with someone because I want to be? This is entirely new territory. Lena stopped walking, turning to face him. You've seriously never been on a real date. Define real. You know, two people who like each other, spending time together without ulterior motives. Getting to know each other because they want to, not because it serves some larger purpose. Dominic considered this, his expression thoughtful. Then, no. I've had relationships, if you can call them that, arrangements with women who understood the limitations, but nothing real, nothing that felt like it mattered beyond the moment. And this? Does this feel like it matters? His eyes found hers, storm gray and devastatingly honest. This feels like the only thing that's ever mattered. The intensity of his gaze made Lena's breath catch. She should have been frightened by the depth of feeling in those words, should have recognized the danger of falling for someone who felt things with such absolute certainty. But instead, she felt her own walls crumbling, the careful defenses she'd built dissolving like sand in the tide. I'm scared, she admitted quietly, of how fast this is moving, of how much I already care about you when I barely know you, of what it means that I'm standing here on a beach, eating ice cream, with a man who could have me killed with a phone call. I would never— I know, that's not the point. Lena finished her ice cream, tossing the napkin in a nearby trash can. The point is that your world and mine shouldn't fit together. That this should feel wrong and dangerous and like a terrible mistake. But it doesn't. It feels right in a way that terrifies me more than any threat ever could. Dominic reached out, cupping her face in his hands with a tenderness that made her chest ache. I'm scared too. Of losing you before I've really had you. Of watching you realize that I'm exactly as dangerous as you should believe I am. Of the moment when you look at me and see only the monster instead of the man trying to be better. I don't think you're a monster. You should. His voice was rough, heavy with self-recrimination. I've done things, Lena. Things I can't take back. Things that would change the way you look at me if you knew the details. Then don't tell me the details, not yet. She covered his hands with hers, holding them against her face. Right now, in this moment, you're just Dominic, a man who's trying to figure out how to be normal, a man who offered to take me home to Iowa because he knows how much it matters. That's who I see. Can we just be that for a while, before the reality of your world crashes back in? He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. We can try. But Lena, you need to understand something. My world doesn't take breaks. It doesn't care about beach days or normal dates or the fact that I want to be different for you. Eventually, it's going to demand attention, and when it does, we'll deal with it, together. The word felt significant, weighted with promise and risk in equal measure. Isn't that what people do when they care about each other? Face things together instead of alone? In theory. But theory and practice are very different things when the threats are real and the violence is personal. Despite his words, Dominic's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close. They stood like that for a long moment, the ocean stretching endlessly before them, the warmth of the sun on their backs feeling like borrowed time. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the small town. Dominic bought her saltwater taffy from a shop run by an elderly woman who called him dear, and told Lena she had good taste in men. They walked along the beach, shoes abandoned in the car, feet sinking into cold sand. They talked about everything, his childhood before his father's business consumed their family, her dreams of opening a community health clinic someday, the books they'd both loved, the music that moved them. It was easy, frighteningly easy. Like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. Like they fit together in ways that defied logic and circumstance. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Dominic led her to a small restaurant overlooking the water. It was the kind of place locals loved and tourists stumbled upon by accident. Worn wooden floors, mismatched tables, the smell of fresh seafood, and garlic butter. They sat by the window, watching the light change across the waves. "Tell me about your father," Lena said after they'd ordered. Maya mentioned he built the empire, but she never talks about what he was like. As a person, I mean. Not as a crime lord. Dominic's expression shuddered slightly, the easy warmth from the afternoon fading into something more guarded. He was complicated, brilliant and brutal in equal measure. He built something extraordinary out of nothing, started with a small smuggling operation and turned it into an empire that controlled half the East Coast. But the cost was everything else. His humanity, his relationships, his soul, if you believe in that sort of thing. Do you believe in souls? I don't know anymore. I used to think people were just the sum of their choices. That morality was a construct we used to make sense of chaos. But then I met you, and suddenly I want to believe there's something more, something worth redeeming. He took a sip of his water, his eyes distant. My father didn't believe in redemption. He believed in power, in control, in making sure everyone knew the consequences of crossing him. Did he love your mother? In his way, which is to say obsessively and possessively and with absolutely no regard for what she actually wanted or needed. Dominic's laugh was hollow. He saw her at a party, decided she was his, and pursued her with the same ruthless efficiency he applied to everything else. She didn't stand a chance. By the time she realized what she'd married into, she was already pregnant with me and too entangled to escape. Lena thought about Sophia's warning at the estate, about how loving a veil was beautiful and terrible and consuming. Does that scare you, that you might be like him? Every single day. His eyes found hers, raw with vulnerability. I see the way I think about you, Lena, the possessiveness, the need to control your safety, to eliminate any threat before it can touch you, the absolute certainty that you're mine even though you've never agreed to be. And I wonder how much of that is love and how much is just my father's legacy playing out through me. What's the difference? The question seemed to catch him off guard. What? Between love and possession, between protecting someone and controlling them. Where's the line and how do you know which side you're on? Lena leaned forward, needing him to understand this was important. Because from where I'm sitting, the fact that you're asking these questions, that you're worried about becoming your father, that you stopped tracking my phone when I asked, even though it clearly bothers you, that tells me you know the difference. You might struggle with it, but you know it. You have more faith in me than I deserve. Or maybe you have less faith in yourself than you should. Their food arrived, providing a natural pause in the conversation. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun complete its descent toward the horizon. When Dominic spoke again, his voice was quiet, almost hesitant. I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. Not my mother, not my siblings, not my closest advisors. He set down his fork, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her heart race. I want out, not just for you, though you're the catalyst. I want out because I'm tired of being the monster, tired of making decisions that cost people their lives, tired of going to bed every night calculating how many enemies I made that day and which one is most likely to come for me. So why don't you leave? Because it's not that simple. I can't just walk away without a succession plan. The power vacuum would start a war, not just between my organization and our rivals, but within our own family. Lena reached across the table, taking his hand. So what's the solution? I've been working on one. Quietly, carefully. Dominic's thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture almost absent. There's another family, the Castellanos. Old alliance, mutual respect. Their current leader is getting ready to retire, and his son, Marcus, is smart. Ruthless, but not cruel. We've been in preliminary talks about a merger, combining territories, consolidating power, creating something more stable than what we have now. And you trust this, Marcus? As much as I trust anyone in this world, which is to say not completely, but enough to work with. He paused, seeming to weigh his words. The merger would give me an exit strategy. I could step back, hand over operational control to Marcus and Uncle Thomas working together. They'd balance each other out, keep things stable. I'd maintain a titular role for appearances, but the day-to-day, the violence, the constant threat, that would be over. How long would that take? Months? Maybe a year. There are deals to negotiate, alliances to shore up, potential rivals to neutralize before they can take advantage of the transition. His grip on her hand tightened. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand that I meant what I said about walking away, about building something different. But I also need you to understand it won't happen overnight, and the period between now and then is going to be dangerous. Lena absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man sitting across from her with the reality of what he was describing. Mergers and power vacuums and neutralizing rivals. It sounded like corporate strategy, but she knew the stakes were measured in blood rather than stock prices. What do you need from me? She asked finally. Patience, understanding that there will be times I can't tell you everything. Trust that I'm working towards something better even when it looks like I'm doing the opposite. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. And if I'm asking too much, if this is more than you can give, tell me now. Before I'm in so deep I can't find my way back out. Lena thought about her carefully constructed life, her plans for a safe and predictable future. She thought about her grandmother's sacrifices and her own hard-won independence. She thought about all the reasons she should stand up, walk away, return to the world where the most dangerous thing she faced was a difficult patient or a failed exam. And then she thought about the way Dominic looked at her like she was something precious and rare. The way he'd offered to take her home to Iowa, not because he wanted to buy her affection, but because he understood how much it mattered. The way he'd admitted to being scared and uncertain and desperately trying to be better than what he was born to be. I'm not going anywhere, she said, and watched relief flood his features. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't lie to me. Even if the truth is ugly or dangerous or something you think I can't handle, don't lie to protect me from reality. I'm stronger than I look, Dominic. I've survived things that would break most people. I can handle the truth. What I can't handle is being kept in the dark about things that might affect my life. I promise. His voice was solemn, weighted with the gravity of an oath. No lies, even when the truth is hard. They finished dinner as the last light faded from the sky, leaving the world bathed in twilight. The drive back to the city felt too short, like they were racing toward an ending neither of them wanted. Dominic drove with one hand on the wheel, the other holding hers, and Lena memorized the feeling of his palm against hers, warm and solid and real. When they pulled up in front of her building, neither of them moved to get out. They sat in the idling car, the engine humming, the city night pressing in around them. Thank you for today, Lena said quietly. For trying normal, for showing me who you are beyond the reputation and the business. Thank you for giving me the chance. Dominic turned in his seat, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. Can I see you again? Tomorrow, if you're free, or the day after, or whenever you have time between classes and rotations and saving lives. Tomorrow's good. I have studying to do, but I could use a break around 6. Maybe dinner? I'll pick you up at 6. His hand lingered on her cheek, thumb brushing against her skin with devastating gentleness. Lena? Yeah? I'm going to kiss you now, if that's okay? If you want me to. Her heart performed that acrobatic leap again, her breath catching in her throat. I want you to. Dominic leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind or pull away. But Lena stayed perfectly still, her eyes fluttering closed as his lips met hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, like he was afraid she might shatter. But when she responded, her hand coming up to curl in his shirt, something shifted. The kiss deepened, became hungry and desperate and full of all the longing they'd been carefully controlling. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. I should let you go, before I do something reckless, like asking you to come home with me. Would that be so terrible? Yes, because you deserve better than rushed decisions and passion without planning. You deserve to be courted properly, taken to dinner, given flowers, treated like you're precious, which you are. He pressed one more soft kiss to her lips, then forced himself to pull back. Tomorrow, 6 o'clock, and I'm bringing you flowers whether you want them or not. Lena laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I'll see you tomorrow, Dominic. She got out of the car on shaking legs, feeling his eyes on her as she walked to her building. When she reached the door, she turned back to find him still watching, his expression intense and tender in the glow of the streetlights. She waved. He nodded. And then she was inside, her back against the door, her heart racing like she'd just run a marathon. Maya was waiting on the couch with wine and a knowing smile. So, how was normal? Terrifying, perfect, completely overwhelming. Lena crossed to the couch, accepting the glass Maya offered. I think I'm falling for him, Maya. Really falling. And I don't know if that's brave or stupid or both. Probably both. Maya clinked her glass against Lena's. That's what love is, though. Equal parts courage and insanity. Welcome to the club. That night, Lena dreamed of ocean waves and storm-gray eyes and kisses that tasted like promises she wasn't sure either of them could keep. When she woke, she found a text from Dominic sent at 2 a.m. Can't sleep, keep thinking about you, about tomorrow, about the fact that I've never felt this way before, and it scares me as much as it excites me. Sweet dreams, Lena. She smiled, typing a response, even though she knew he was probably asleep by now. I'm scared too, but I'm not running. See you at 6. His reply came almost immediately, suggesting he wasn't asleep at all. That's all I needed to hear. Now, maybe I can rest. Tomorrow can't come fast enough. Lena set the phone aside, that dangerous warmth spreading through her chest again. She was in trouble. Deep, complicated, beautiful trouble. And for the first time in her carefully controlled life, she didn't want to find her way out. She wanted to see where falling would take her. Tomorrow arrived carrying more weight than a single day should hold. Lena went through her morning routine on autopilot. The early run, the shower, the carefully selected outfit that looked effortless but had taken 20 minutes to choose. She tried to study, but cardiovascular pathophysiology held no appeal when her own heart was performing arrhythmias every time she thought about seeing Dominic again. At 5:45, her phone rang. Not a text, but an actual call, and the tension in Dominic's voice was immediately apparent. Lena, I need you to listen to me very carefully and not panic. His words were clipped, controlled, but she could hear the fury underneath. Are you at home? Yes. What's wrong? Stay there. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or Marcus. I'm sending him to your building now. In the background, she could hear voices, movement, the sound of organized chaos. There's been a situation. The Antonellis are making a move and they've been watching you, watching us. Fear spiked through her chest, cold and sharp. Dominic, what kind of move? The kind where they try to prove they're still relevant by going after what matters to me. His voice dropped lower, dangerous. I won't let them touch you, Lena. I swear to you, I won't let anyone hurt you. But I need you to trust me and do exactly what I'm telling you. I'm scared. I know, I'm sorry. This is exactly what I was afraid of, my world bleeding into yours. She heard a car door slam, an engine roar to life. Marcus will be there in 3 minutes. He's going to take you somewhere safe, somewhere they can't find you. Where are you? Dealing with this. Making sure the Antonellis understand what happens when they threaten what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like armor, like protection wrapped in violence and absolute certainty. I'll come for you as soon as it's safe. Could be a few hours, could be longer. But I will come for you, Lena. I promise. The line went dead before she could respond. Lena stood frozen in her kitchen, phone clutched in shaking hands, trying to process what was happening. This was real. Not some abstract danger she could rationalize away, but immediate and present and aimed directly at her because she'd made the mistake of mattering to Dominic Vale. Maya emerged from her bedroom, already dressed and moving with purpose. Dom called you? You knew? He called me first, told me to pack a bag and be ready to leave. Maya was pulling out a duffel bag, throwing clothes into it with practiced efficiency. The Antonellis have been quiet for months, but apparently they've been planning something. They grabbed one of our people, tried to get information about Dom's schedule, his routines. When that didn't work, they started looking for leverage points. Me, I'm a leverage point. Quote. Lena's voice sounded distant to her own ears, disconnected from the fear flooding her system. You're more than that. You're the first person Dom has cared about in years, maybe ever, not counting family. Maya crossed to her, gripping her shoulders firmly. Listen to me. Marcus is the best. He's kept me alive through 3 separate attempts on my life. He'll protect you until Dom can get this sorted. But you need to pack a bag now, essentials only. We're leaving in 2 minutes. Lena moved on instinct, grabbing her backpack and shoving in clothes, toiletries, her phone charger, the textbook she'd been studying from. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely zip the bag closed. This couldn't be happening. 24 hours ago, she'd been eating ice cream on a beach, kissing Dominic like they had all the time in the world. Now she was packing an emergency bag because crime families were using her as a pawn in some deadly game. The knock on the door made them both jump. Maya checked the peephole, then unlocked the deadbolt. Marcus filled the doorway, 6 feet of solid muscle and cold efficiency. He looked at them with eyes that had seen too much violence and nodded once. "Car's running downstairs. We need to move now." They followed him down the stairs, moving quickly, but not running. The gray sedan was idling at the curb, back door already open. Marcus ushered them inside with professional detachment, then slid behind the wheel. They were moving before Lena had her seatbelt fastened. "Where are we going?" she asked, watching her building disappear in the side mirror. "Safe house in Westchester, 45 minutes north. Security cameras, reinforced doors, enough supplies to last a week if necessary." Marcus's eyes never stopped moving, checking mirrors, scanning intersections, looking for threats. "Mr. Vale will join you once he's handled the immediate situation." "What exactly is the immediate situation?" Marcus's expression remained neutral. "Need to know basis, Miss Carter, and right now you don't need to know." The drive passed in tense silence. Lena watched the city give way to suburbs, then to rural darkness punctuated by occasional streetlights. Maya sat beside her, face pale but composed, and Lena realized this was routine for her. This was what it meant to be a Vale, always one step away from violence, always prepared to run, always living with the knowledge that safety was temporary and conditional. The safe house turned out to be a sprawling colonial setback from the road, surrounded by woods and protected by gates that required biometric access. Marcus pulled into the garage, waiting until the door closed completely before letting them out. Inside, the house was comfortably furnished but impersonal, the kind of place maintained for function rather than feeling. "Kitchen stocked, bedrooms are upstairs. Don't go outside, don't open the curtains, don't answer the door for anyone except me or Mr. Vale." Marcus handed Maya a phone. A burner, Lena realized. "He'll call when he can. Until then, sit tight and stay calm." "You're not staying?" Lena asked, hating the tremor in her voice. "I'm going back to help Mr. Vale. But there are 2 men outside. You won't see them, but they're there. You're safe here, Miss Carter. I give you my word." Then he was gone, the garage door closing behind him, leaving Lena and Maya alone in the quiet house. Maya immediately went to check the windows, pulling curtains closed, while Lena stood in the kitchen trying to process the surreal turn her life had taken. "This is insane," she said finally. 24 hours ago, I was having the most perfect date of my life, and now I'm hiding in a safe house because mobsters want to kidnap me." "Welcome to the family business." Maya's laugh was hollow. "I told you it was complicated." "You said it was dangerous. You didn't say it was hide in a fortified house while people plot your murder dangerous." "Would you have believed me if I had?" Maya opened the refrigerator, pulling out bottled water and handing one to Lena. "Besides, it's not usually this bad. The Antonellis have been relatively quiet since Dom dealt with their last attempt to expand into our territory. This feels like a last desperate grab for relevance. And I'm the grab. You're what matters most to Dom right now, which makes you valuable, but that also means he'll burn down half the city before he lets anyone touch you." Maya's expression softened. "I know this is terrifying. I know it's not what you signed up for, but my brother is the most dangerous man I know when someone threatens what he loves. The Antonellis just made a critical tactical error." Lena sank into a chair at the kitchen table, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. "He doesn't love me. We've known each other for 3 weeks. Time doesn't matter to people like Dom. When he decides something, that's it. No hesitation, no second guessing. He decided you were his the moment you walked into our apartment, looking at him like he was a problem to be solved." Maya sat across from her, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "The question is, are you his? Because if you're not, if this is too much, you need to tell him now, before this goes any further, before more people get hurt. Was she his? The question should have been impossible to answer. She barely knew Dominic beyond a few conversations and one perfect day at the beach. She didn't know his favorite color or how he took his coffee or what he did on lazy Sunday mornings, but she knew the way he looked at her like she was something precious. She knew the gentleness in his touch despite the violence in his hands. She knew that he was trying to be better, to build something different, and that he'd chosen her as his reason to try. "I don't want to run," Lena said quietly. "I should. Any rational person would. But I keep thinking about what you said, about love being equal parts courage and insanity. Maybe I'm insane. Maybe I'm just tired of being careful. But I don't want to run." "Then don't. But understand what you're choosing. Because once Dom eliminates this threat, there will be another. And another. That's the reality of his world until he can fully extract himself. And even then, the past doesn't just disappear. There will always be someone who remembers what he was, what he did, who wants revenge or leverage, or just to prove they're not afraid of him." "How do you live with it? The constant fear?" Maya's smile was sad and knowing. "You learn to compartmentalize, to enjoy the good moments without letting the threat of violence poison them. You learn to trust that the people protecting you know what they're doing. And you learn to be stronger than you ever thought possible, because the alternative is letting fear win." They spent the next few hours in limbo, waiting for news that didn't come. Maya made dinner from the stocked pantry, pasta with marinara sauce from a jar, garlic bread, a salad. They ate in near silence, both jumping at every sound from outside. Lena tried to study, but the words swam meaninglessly across the page. Her mind kept returning to Dominic, wondering where he was, what he was doing, whether he was safe. At 11:30, the burner phone rang. Maya answered immediately, her face tightening as she listened. "Okay. Yes. She's fine. We're both fine." A pause. "I'll tell her. Be careful, Dom." She hung up and looked at Lena. "He's okay. The situation is contained. He'll be here in about an hour." "What happened?" "He didn't say. Just that it's handled and we're safe." Maya stood, stretching. "I'm going to try to get some sleep. You should too. Tomorrow's going to be intense. Dom's going to want to have some serious conversations about what happens next." But Lena couldn't sleep. She sat in the living room with all the lights off, staring out through a gap in the curtains at the dark woods beyond. Somewhere out there, men with guns were watching the house, keeping her safe from threats she couldn't see. And somewhere closer, Dominic was driving through the night to get to her. Probably shot, voice covered in blood, and consequences she didn't want to imagine. She heard the car before she saw it, the low rumble of an engine cutting through the silence. Headlights swept across the trees as a black SUV pulled into the driveway. The garage door opened, closed. And then Dominic was there, moving through the house with purpose until he found her in the darkened living room. He looked like he'd been through hell. His clothes were disheveled, his knuckles were bruised and split, and there was a cut above his left eyebrow that had been cleaned but not properly treated. But his eyes were fierce and alive and locked onto her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Lena." Her name came out rough, almost broken. "Are you hurt? Did anyone touch you?" "I'm fine. Marcus got us out before anything could happen." She stood, crossing to him, her hands coming up to frame his face. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing. Superficial." But he leaned into her touch like a man starved for contact, his eyes closing briefly. "I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. The Antonellis knew about us. They'd been watching, planning, waiting for the right moment to strike. If Marcus hadn't intercepted their communications, but he did. And I'm safe. We're both safe." Lena's thumb brushed carefully over the cut on his eyebrow. "What happened to them? The Antonellis?" Dominic's expression went dark, dangerous. "What needed to happen? They won't be a threat anymore. Not to you, not to anyone in my family. I made sure of it." "What?" She should have been horrified, should have demanded details, insisted on knowing exactly what "made sure of it" meant. But looking at him, at this man who'd clearly walked through violence to protect her, Lena found she didn't want to know. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. "You're exhausted," she said instead. Come on, let me clean that cut properly before it gets infected. She led him to the bathroom, made him sit on the closed toilet while she found the first aid kit. Dominic watched her with those storm-gray eyes as she cleaned the wound with gentle efficiency, her nursing training taking over. His hands found her hips, pulling her to stand between his legs, and she could feel the tension radiating off him in waves. "I thought I was going to lose you," he said quietly. "When I got the intelligence that they were planning to grab you, use you to force me into surrendering territory. I've never been that scared in my life, Lena. Not when I was shot at. Not when I was nearly killed in a car bombing. Not ever. The thought of them touching you, hurting you. They didn't. You made sure they didn't." She finished with the cut, setting aside the supplies and cupping his face in her hands. "I'm right here. Safe. Because of you. Because of me, you were in danger in the first place." His voice was raw with self-recrimination. "This is what I warned you about. This is what happens when you matter to someone like me. You become a target, a weakness to be exploited. Then maybe you need to stop seeing me as a weakness and start seeing me as a choice." Lena held his gaze, needing him to understand this. "I chose to get in your car that night. I chose to have coffee with you. I chose to go to the beach and let you kiss me and fall for you, even though every rational part of my brain was screaming that it was a terrible idea. Those were my choices, Dominic, my risks to take. Don't you dare try to take that agency away from me by deciding what I can or can't handle." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. "You're extraordinary. Do you know that? Most people in your position would be demanding I take them home, cut all contact, pretend this never happened. But you're standing here lecturing me about agency and choice like you're not terrified." "Who says I'm not terrified?" Lena's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I'm absolutely terrified. Of what happened tonight, of what could have happened, of how much I already care about you, and how completely out of control this all feels. But I'm more terrified of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been." Dominic stood, his hands sliding up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. "I love you." The words came out fierce and certain, no hesitation, no qualification. "I know it's too soon. I know I have no right to feel this way about someone I've known for 3 weeks. But I love you, Lena Carter. You make me want to be better than I am. You make me believe redemption is possible. You make me feel human instead of monstrous." Lena's breath caught, her heart performing acrobatics against her ribs. She should have been overwhelmed, should have needed time to process, should have done anything except what she did next. But standing there in that bathroom, looking at this dangerous, broken, beautiful man who'd just confessed to loving her, she found there was only one possible response. "I love you too." The admission felt like jumping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. "I don't know what that means or where this goes or how we make this work, but I love you. And I'm not running." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the gentle kiss on the beach. This was desperate and consuming, all the fear and fury and relief of the past few hours channeled into the press of his mouth against hers. Lena kissed him back with equal desperation, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressed against his like she could somehow crawl inside his skin and make a home there. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight. Just sleep. I need to know you're safe, that you're here, that this is real." "Okay." The word was simple, but it carried the weight of everything they'd just confessed. Lena took his hand, leading him upstairs to one of the bedrooms. They lay down together fully clothed, Dominic's arms wrapped around her like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. "Tell me about the merger," Lena said quietly, needing to focus on something practical, something concrete. "With the Castellanos. Is it still happening?" "It has to now. After tonight, after what I did to the Antonellis, the other families are going to be watching, waiting to see if I'm losing control. The merger will show strength, stability, that I'm not acting out of emotion but strategic necessity." His hand traced idle patterns on her back, soothing. "Marcus Castellano and I have a meeting scheduled for next week. If all goes well, we could have the framework in place within a month. And then what? Then I start the slow process of extracting myself. transferring operational control, setting up the structures that let me step back without creating a power vacuum. It could take 6 months, maybe a year. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I know that's a long time to ask you to wait, to live with this constant threat. But I promise you, Lena, I'm working toward an end, toward a life where I can just be Dominic, not the Vale heir, where we can have normal dates and quiet mornings and a future that doesn't involve safe houses and bodyguards. What if I don't want to wait? The words surprised even Lena, but once they were out, she realized she meant them. What if I want to be part of it? Not the violence, but the transition, the planning. I'm good at logistics, at seeing problems before they become critical. Maybe I can help. Dominic pulled back enough to look at her, his expression caught between concern and something that looked dangerously close to hope. Lena, that would mean deeper involvement in my world, meeting with people who've done terrible things, being exposed to information that could put you in even more danger. Are you sure that's what you want? I'm sure I don't want to be sidelined. I'm sure I don't want to sit in safe houses wondering if you're alive while you handle everything alone. She met his eyes steadily. You said you wanted me to be part of your life. This is your life, Dominic, the merger, the extraction plan, all of it. If we're doing this, if we're really building something together, then I need to be involved, not as someone you protect from reality, but as someone who understands it and chooses to stay anyway. You're going to drive me crazy with worry. Good. Then we'll be even. Lena smiled, kissing him softly. I'm not saying I want to attend your strategy meetings or meet with crime bosses, but I want to understand what you're dealing with. I want to be someone you can talk to about the stress and the fear and the impossible choices. I want to be your partner, Dominic, not your kept woman stashed away in safe houses. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, but we do this my way. You stay safe, you follow security protocols, and if I tell you something is too dangerous, you trust me and back off. Deal? Deal. Lena settled back against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Tell me about Marcus Castellano. What's he like? Smart, calculating. He's been groomed for leadership his whole life, but unlike most people in our world, he actually has vision beyond just acquiring power. He wants to modernize, make the operations more sustainable and less violent. We think alike in a lot of ways. Dominic's voice was getting drowsy, exhaustion finally catching up to him. You probably like him. He's got a master's degree in economics, believes in strategy over brute force. Will I meet him at this meeting next week? If you want to. It might actually help, show that I'm serious about building something different, that I have personal stakes in making this work. His arms tightened around her. But Lena, you need to understand something. These people, even the ones I consider allies, they're dangerous. They've done things that would horrify you. Meeting them, being in the same room with them, it's going to change how you see this world, how you see me. Maybe. Or maybe it'll just help me understand you better. Lena tilted her head up to kiss his jaw. I'm not naive, Dominic. I know you've done terrible things. I know the hands holding me right now have caused pain and death. But I also know those same hands were gentle when they touched my face. I know the man who confessed to being scared and wanting to be better. I'm choosing to see all of you, not just the parts that fit my comfortable worldview. What did I do to deserve you? The question was barely a whisper, heavy with wonder and disbelief. You were honest. You tried to be better. You looked at me like I mattered more than power or territory or legacy. Lena's eyes were drifting closed, the adrenaline from earlier finally wearing off. That's all anyone really wants, Dominic, to matter to someone, to be chosen. They fell asleep like that, tangled together in a safe house surrounded by armed guards, the weight of the night's violence still hanging over them. But for those few hours before dawn, wrapped in each other's arms, they were just two people who'd found something rare and precious in the most unlikely of places. When morning came, pale light filtering through the curtains, Lena woke to find Dominic already awake and watching her with an expression that made her chest ache. Hi, she murmured, her voice rough with sleep. Hi yourself. He brushed hair back from her face with gentle fingers. I've been thinking. About? About taking you to Iowa. About meeting your grandmother and showing her that you're okay, that you've built something good here. about proving to both of you that I'm worth the risk you're taking. His thumb traced her lower lip. What if we went this weekend, just you and me, away from all of this? A chance to be normal before the merger negotiations start, and things get complicated again. Lena's heart swelled. You're serious? Even after everything that happened last night? Especially after last night. The Antonellis are no longer a threat. The other families are regrouping, reassessing. We have a window of relative calm before the real work begins. He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips with tender deliberation. Let me do this for you, Lena. Let me show you that I'm not just violence and strategy, that I can be the man who takes you home to meet your grandmother and makes her believe you're going to be happy. Okay. The word came out choked with emotion. Yes, let's go to Iowa. Then it's settled. Dominic stood, pulling her up with him. We'll fly out Friday, come back Sunday. That gives me time to finalize security arrangements and make sure everything's stable here. They went downstairs to find Maya already up and making coffee, looking exhausted but relieved. She took one look at their joined hands and smiled knowingly. So you two figured it out then? Something like that. Dominic accepted the coffee she offered, pulling Lena against his side with his free arm. We're going to Iowa this weekend. Think you can handle things here while I'm gone? Dom, you're the boss. I don't handle things. I just survive them. But Maya's expression was fond, almost proud. Go, show Lena's grandmother what she's getting herself into. Just maybe leave out the part about the safe house and the mob war. Ease her into the whole my grandson-in-law is a crime lord thing. Grandson-in-law? Lena's voice pitched higher. We've been dating for like 2 weeks. Can we slow down on the marriage assumptions? Dominic and Maya exchanged a look that suggested they knew something she didn't. Sure, Dominic said easily. We can slow down. Pretend I'm not already planning how to convince you to spend forever with me, whatever makes you comfortable. Lena should have been overwhelmed, should have pumped the brakes on a relationship that was moving at breakneck speed towards something she wasn't sure she was ready for. But looking at Dominic, at this impossible man who'd confessed to loving her after 3 weeks and was willing to walk away from an empire to build something better, she found she didn't want to slow down at all. She wanted to see where falling would take them, and she was beginning to suspect it would take them somewhere extraordinary. The flight to Iowa happened on a crisp Friday morning in early November, the kind of day where autumn had finally surrendered to winter's approach. Lena sat beside Dominic in first class. He'd insisted, and she'd stopped arguing about money after realizing it was a battle she'd never win, watching clouds scroll past the window and trying to calm the anxiety coiling in her stomach. She's going to love you, Dominic said quietly, his hand finding hers on the armrest. Stop worrying. You don't know that. My grandmother is extremely protective. When I told her I was bringing someone home, she asked if I needed her to get the shotgun cleaned. Lena's laugh was nervous. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. I faced down armed rivals in federal investigations. I think I can handle one protective grandmother. But his smile was gentle, understanding. What did you tell her about me? About what I do? I said you were in business management, which is technically true, just not the whole truth. Lena turned to face him fully. I'm going to tell her everything eventually, but maybe let's get through the weekend first before I explain that the man I'm in love with runs a criminal empire he's trying to dismantle. The words "in love with" still felt new and terrifying in her mouth, but Dominic's expression softened at hearing them. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Whatever you need. This weekend is about you and your grandmother. I'm just grateful to be included. They landed in Des Moines 3 hours later, picked up a rental car, and drove another hour to the small town where Lena had grown up. The landscape was flat and golden, cornfields stretching endlessly under an enormous sky. It was beautiful in its simplicity, so different from the city's chaos and density that Lena felt something in her chest loosen with each mile they traveled. Her grandmother's house sat at the end of a tree-lined street, a modest 2-story with white siding and a wraparound porch. The flower beds were meticulously maintained even in November, the lawn pristine. Lena's throat tightened at the familiar sight, at all the memories contained within those walls. Ready? Dominic asked, putting the car in park. No, but let's do this anyway. Lena took a deep breath and got out. Her grandmother was waiting on the porch before they'd even reached the steps. Margaret Carter was 73 years old, barely 5 feet tall, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Dominic with frank assessment, taking in his expensive clothes and controlled posture, then turned to Lena with raised eyebrows. "Well, you didn't mention he was pretty." Lena felt heat creep up her neck. "Grandma, this is Dominic Vale. Dominic, my grandmother, Margaret Carter." Dominic extended his hand with genuine respect. "Mrs. Carter, it's an honor to meet you. Lena speaks of you constantly." Margaret took his hand but didn't shake it immediately. Instead, she held it, studying his palm with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for fortune tellers or doctors. "You work with your hands. That's good. Too many young men these days have soft hands, soft spines. But you've got scars here. Violence?" Dominic didn't flinch from the assessment. "Some. I won't lie to you about that. And you're protective of my granddaughter. I can see it in how you position yourself. Half a step forward, body angled to shield her. Military training? Private instruction, security work." It wasn't technically a lie, and Margaret seemed to accept it with a small nod. "Well, come inside. I made pot roast, and I want to hear how a man who works in security can afford first-class plane tickets and designer clothes." She released his hand and turned toward the door, throwing over her shoulder, "And don't bother lying. I've lived too long to be easily fooled." Lena caught Dominic's eye, mouthing an apology. He just smiled and followed Margaret inside, his hand finding the small of Lena's back with that now familiar protective gesture. The house smelled exactly as Lena remembered: vanilla and cinnamon and the underlying scent of home-cooked meals and old books. Margaret led them to the dining room, where she'd set the table with her good china and fresh flowers. The pot roast was perfect, tender and rich, served with roasted vegetables and homemade rolls that melted on the tongue. "So," Margaret said after they'd been eating for a few minutes, "business management. What kind of business?" Dominic set down his fork, meeting her eyes directly. "Import and export, primarily. My father built the company, and I inherited it after he passed. It's been complicated, learning to run an organization I never particularly wanted to be part of, but I'm working on transitioning it into something different, something I can be proud of. And my granddaughter fits into this how. She makes me want to be better than I am. She makes me believe that change is possible, that I can build something meaningful instead of just maintaining what I inherited." His hand found Lena's under the table, squeezing gently. "She's the best thing that's ever happened to me, Mrs. Carter. And I know I don't deserve her, but I'm going to spend every day trying to." Margaret studied him for a long moment, then turned to Lena. "You love him?" "I do." The certainty in Lena's voice surprised even herself. "I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but yes, I love him. And he treats you well, respects you, doesn't try to control you or diminish you. He respects me. Sometimes too much. He tries to protect me from things I'm strong enough to handle, but he listens when I push back. He sees me as a partner, not someone who needs to be managed." Lena looked at Dominic, saw the emotion in his eyes. "He's a good man, Grandma, even when his circumstances haven't been." Margaret was quiet for a moment, then she reached across the table and took both their hands, joining them together. "Life is short and uncertain. I learned that watching my daughter destroy herself with addiction, watching my granddaughter have to grow up too fast because of it. If you found something real, something worth fighting for, then you hold on to it. You hear me? Both of you. You hold on to it, and you don't let fear or judgment or anything else tear it apart." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "I've missed you so much." "I've missed you too, baby girl, but I understand why you stayed away. Pride is a powerful thing. You got that from me, unfortunately." Margaret squeezed their hands once more, then released them. "Now finish your dinner before it gets cold, and then Dominic can help me with the dishes while you go through those boxes in the attic I've been meaning to show you." After dinner, Lena found herself climbing the narrow stairs to the attic, while Dominic remained in the kitchen with her grandmother. She could hear their voices drifting up. Margaret asking pointed questions, Dominic answering with careful honesty. She trusted him to handle it, to show her grandmother the man she'd fallen in love with rather than the reputation he was trying to leave behind. The attic was dusty and full of memories. Margaret had organized several boxes labeled with Lena's name, filled with childhood drawings, school reports, photographs from better times. Lena sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, sorting through pieces of her past, when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Dominic emerged into the dim space, his expression thoughtful. "Your grandmother is formidable. What did she say to you?" "She asked me point blank if I was involved in organized crime." He settled beside her, picking up a photograph of young Lena at a spelling bee. "I told her the truth, that I inherited my father's criminal empire, that I've done things I'm not proud of, and that I'm working to extract myself from that life, that I love you enough to walk away from all of it, if that's what it takes." Lena's breath caught. "And what did she say?" "She said she could see it in my eyes, the violence and the regret and the genuine desire to be better. She said she didn't care what I'd done in the past, as long as I was committed to being the man you deserve in the future." His voice dropped lower. "Then she told me if I ever hurt you, she has friends who know how to make bodies disappear in cornfields, and she wasn't joking." Despite everything, Lena laughed. "That sounds like her." They spent the next hour going through boxes together, Dominic asking questions about her childhood, about the girl she'd been before life had forced her to become someone harder and more guarded. Lena found herself sharing stories she'd buried for years, happy memories mixed with painful ones, the complicated tapestry of a life shaped by both love and loss. "I want to give her money," Dominic said suddenly, "for everything she did for you, to make sure she's comfortable, that she doesn't have to work herself into exhaustion anymore." "She won't take it. She's too proud." "Then I'll set up a trust, something that pays out monthly, disguised as Social Security or pension adjustments. She doesn't have to know it's from me." He turned to face her fully. "I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, Lena. Let me use some of it for something that actually matters. For the woman who raised the person I love." Lena wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the principle of independence she'd clung to for so long. But looking at her grandmother's house, seeing the worn furniture and the careful budgeting evident in every corner, she found she couldn't. Margaret had sacrificed everything for her. If Dominic wanted to give something back, who was she to refuse on her grandmother's behalf? "Okay, but anonymously. She can't know it's from you." "Done." He kissed her softly, sweetly. "Thank you for trusting me with this." They spent the rest of the weekend in a bubble of normalcy that felt almost surreal after the chaos of the previous week. Margaret cooked elaborate meals and told embarrassing stories about Lena's childhood. They went to church on Sunday, Dominic sitting through the service with respectful attention, despite clearly being uncomfortable with the religious aspects. They walked through the town's small downtown, visited Lena's old school, drove past the house where she'd lived before everything fell apart. On Sunday evening, as they prepared to leave for the airport, Margaret pulled Lena aside on the porch. "He's carrying heavy burdens. I can see it in how he holds himself, like he's expecting an attack from any direction, but he loves you fiercely. That kind of love can save a man, or it can destroy him. You need to decide which it's going to be." "I want to save him. I want to help him become who he's trying to be." "Then you need to be strong enough to let him stumble sometimes, to let him fail and get back up without trying to fix everything for him. Love isn't about perfection, Lena. It's about choosing to stay even when things get hard, even when the weight of someone else's past threatens to crush you both." Margaret cupped her face gently. "Can you do that?" "I don't know, but I want to try." "Then try. And know that I'm always here if you need somewhere to run. Somewhere safe." She pulled Lena into a fierce hug. "I'm proud of you, baby girl. So proud of the woman you've become." The flight home was quiet, both of them processing the weekend. As they drove from the airport back to the city, Dominic's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression tightened. "I need to take this. It's Marcus Castellano." He answered, his voice shifting into that controlled, authoritative tone Lena was beginning to recognize as his business persona. The conversation was brief but intense, full of coded language and careful phrasing. When he hung up, his jaw was tight. "The meeting's been moved up. Tomorrow night. Marcus wants to finalize the merger framework before word spreads about what happened with the Antonellis. He's concerned other families might try to make moves while they think we're vulnerable." Are we? Vulnerable? No, but perception matters in this world. If we look weak, we become targets. He pulled the car into her building's parking lot but didn't move to get out. Lena, this meeting is going to be different from anything you've experienced. These are dangerous men discussing dangerous things. If you want to be there, if you still want to be involved, I need you to understand what you're walking into. Tell me. So he did. He explained the structure of the meeting, the key players who'd be present, the topics that would be discussed. He was brutally honest about the violence underlying every negotiation, the implicit threats in every handshake. He painted a picture of his world in stark, unforgiving detail, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. When he finished, Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm going. Not because I think I can contribute strategically, I don't know enough about your business for that, but because I need to see this part of your life. I need to understand what you're walking away from and why it matters so much." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." The next evening, Lena dressed carefully in a simple black dress that Maya had helped her choose, professional, understated, nothing that would draw unnecessary attention. Dominic picked her up at 7, looking devastating in a charcoal suit that made his eyes seem almost silver. Marcus was already in the car, reviewing documents, and he looked up when Lena slid into the back seat. "Miss Carter, I've heard a lot about you." His handshake was firm, his assessment frank. "Dom says you want to observe tonight. If that's acceptable. It's unusual, but these are unusual circumstances." Marcus returned his attention to Dominic. "The Castellanos are bringing Roberto and his father. The Volkovs are sending Victor. Your Uncle Thomas will be there representing the Vale's interests beyond the merger. It's going to be tense." The meeting was held in a private room at an upscale restaurant that had been closed to the public for the evening. Security was heavy, men in suits positioned at every entrance, metal detectors, the kind of precautions that suggested everyone expected violence as a possibility. Lena stayed close to Dominic as they entered, feeling the weight of scrutiny from every person in the room. The next 3 hours were an education in power dynamics and barely concealed threats. The men around the table spoke in careful euphemisms, discussing territory like it was real estate and violence like it was market strategy. Dominic was brilliant, controlled and strategic, giving ground where it didn't matter and holding firm on points that did. He negotiated the merger framework with precision, creating a structure that would allow him to gradually step back while maintaining enough influence to protect his family. Marcus Castellano was equally impressive, younger than Lena had expected, but with the kind of sharp intelligence that suggested he'd been preparing for this role his entire life. Together, he and Dominic presented a unified front that made it clear the merger was happening whether the other families approved or not. Thomas Vale was the wild card. Dominic's uncle watched the proceedings with calculating eyes, occasionally interjecting with concerns that sounded reasonable but clearly carried ulterior motives. Lena watched Dominic manage him with careful diplomacy, giving him enough involvement to satisfy his ego while ensuring he couldn't derail the larger plan. When the meeting finally concluded after midnight, Lena's head was spinning with information and implications. They'd done it. Secured the framework for the merger, established timelines, created the structure for Dominic's eventual exit. But the cost was evident in the tension around the table, the veiled threats exchanged, the knowledge that any one of these alliances could fracture at any moment. As they left the restaurant, Dominic's phone buzzed with an urgent message. His expression went dark as he read it. Then he was pulling Lena toward the car with sudden urgency. "What's wrong?" she asked, fear spiking through her chest. "The Volkovs. They weren't satisfied with the merger terms. Victor just authorized a hit on one of our key suppliers, a message that they're not going to accept our expanding influence without pushing back." He was already dialing, barking orders to people Lena couldn't see. "Marcus, I need you to lock down our territories. Thomas, get Mother and Julian to the estate and keep them there. Lena, don't you dare tell me to go hide in a safe house." Dominic's eyes met hers, storm gray and fierce. "I was going to say, stay with me. I'm not letting you out of my sight until this is resolved." The next 72 hours were a blur of strategic meetings, tense phone calls, and Dominic orchestrating responses with lethal precision. Lena saw a different side of him, the crime lord who'd built and maintained an empire through intelligence and controlled violence. He was terrifying and magnificent, making decisions that affected lives with the same calm authority he'd used ordering coffee. But she also saw the toll it took, the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight on his shoulders, the way he seemed to age years in just days. And she understood finally why he wanted so desperately to walk away. This wasn't power, it was a prison made of blood and obligation. On the third night, Dominic came to her apartment at 2 a.m. He looked like he'd been through hell, his shirt untucked, tie long gone, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Lena opened the door and he walked straight into her arms, holding her like she was the only solid thing in his universe. "It's done," he said quietly. "The Volkovs have agreed to respect the merger terms. We've reinforced our alliances, eliminated the immediate threats. It's stable again, for now." "How did you convince them?" "I made it clear that challenging us would cost them more than they could afford. I showed them exactly how much damage I could do if pushed, and then I offered them a piece of the expanded territory as a gesture of goodwill, enough to make peace more profitable than war." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes searching. "You saw it all this week, the meetings, the calculations, the casual way we discuss violence like it's business strategy. Do you understand now? Why I want out? Why I can't keep doing this?" "I understand." Lena cupped his face in her hands. "And I love you anyway, not despite what you are, but including it, all of it." Something in Dominic's expression cracked. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." She kissed him softly. "How long until the merger is complete? Until you can actually step back?" 3 months, maybe 4. Marcus and I are meeting with our respective families next week to formalize everything. Then there's the transition period, transferring operations, establishing the new hierarchy, making sure the structure is solid enough that my absence won't create opportunities for rivals. He led her to the couch, pulling her down beside him. "But Lena, I need you to know something. Even after I'm out, even after I've handed over operational control, there will always be people who remember what I was, who want revenge or who see me as a threat. I can minimize the danger, but I can't eliminate it completely." "I know, and I'm staying anyway." She curled into his side, fitting perfectly against him. "We'll face it together, whatever comes. That's what partners do." "Partners." He tested the word, seeming to like the weight of it. "Is that what we are?" "I hope so, because I'm pretty sure I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Dominic Vale. And that's going to require some serious partnership to pull off." His arms tightened around her. "Marry me." Lena's breath caught. "What? Marry me? Not now, not until this is all sorted and I can give you the wedding you deserve. But commit to me. Promise me that when I finally walk away from all of this, you'll be there waiting, that we'll build something new together." He tilted her face up to his eyes burning with intensity. "I love you, Lena Carter. You're the reason I believe redemption is possible. You're the future I'm fighting for. Marry me." She should have said it was too soon, should have insisted on more time, more certainty, more evidence that they could actually make this impossible relationship work. But looking at him, at this complicated, dangerous, beautiful man who was willing to give up everything for a chance at something better, Lena found there was only one possible answer. "Yes. When this is over, when you're free, when we can start fresh, yes, I'll marry you." The kiss that followed was different from all the others. It was a promise and a commitment, and the beginning of something that felt permanent in a way nothing else in Lena's life ever had. When they finally broke apart, Dominic was smiling, genuinely smiling in a way she'd rarely seen. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he said quietly. "I know, but right now I need you to sleep. You're exhausted, and you're no good to anyone if you collapse from stress." She stood, pulling him toward her bedroom. "Come on, we'll face the future tomorrow. Tonight, just rest." They slept tangled together, and for those few hours, the world outside ceased to matter. There was just Dominic and Lena, 2 people who'd found each other against all odds, and decided that love was worth fighting for. The next 4 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. The merger moved forward with careful precision, each step choreographed to avoid triggering conflicts or creating power vacuums. Dominic and Marcus worked together seamlessly, building a structure that satisfied the various families while gradually reducing Dominic's operational involvement. Lena finished her nursing program at the top of her class, accepted a position at County General, and spent her free time helping Dominic plan his exit strategy. She learned more about his world than she'd ever wanted to know, but she also saw the change in him as the end came into sight. The tension in his shoulders eased, the darkness in his eyes lightened. He started talking about the future in concrete terms, where they'd live, what he'd do with his time, the community health clinic they'd open together. In March, Dominic walked into a final meeting with the consolidated families and formally handed over operational control. He maintained a ceremonial role, advisor, consultant, the name that still carried weight, but the day-to-day violence and decision-making passed to Marcus Castellano and Thomas Vale. It wasn't a clean break, but it was as close as anyone in his position had ever managed. That night, Dominic came to Lena's apartment carrying a bottle of champagne in a small velvet box. She knew what it was before he even opened it, but the ring still took her breath away. A simple solitaire diamond on a platinum band, elegant and perfect. "You said when I was free," he said, dropping to one knee in her tiny kitchen. "I'm free, Lena, or as free as I'm ever going to be. Marry me. Build a life with me. Help me become the man you always believed I could be." "Yes," she said through tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony in Iowa, with Margaret beaming in the front row and Maya crying happy tears beside her. Marcus Castellano attended, as did Sophia and Julian. Even Thomas came, looking vaguely uncomfortable but genuinely pleased. It was a strange mix of Lena's nursing school friends and reformed criminals, of small-town Iowa and East Coast crime families, of two worlds that should never have intersected but somehow fit together perfectly. For their honeymoon, Dominic surprised her with tickets back to the beach town where they'd had their first real date. They walked the boardwalk hand in hand, ate overpriced ice cream, and talked about the future they were building. "I've been thinking about the clinic," Dominic said as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "What if we started with something small, a free clinic in your old neighborhood, the one where you used to volunteer? We could fund it ourselves, staff it with nurses and doctors who believe in accessible health care, make it a proof of concept for something larger. That would cost a fortune. I have a fortune, and for the first time in my life, I'd be using it for something that actually matters." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "I want to build something good, Lena. Something that heals instead of harms. Something I can be proud of when I look back on my life." "Then let's do it. Together." They launched the Cartervale Free Clinic 8 months after their wedding in a renovated building in Lena's old neighborhood. It was small at first, just 3 exam rooms, a handful of staff, limited hours. But word spread quickly about the clinic that charged nothing and turned no one away. Within a year, they'd expanded to 2 locations. Within 2, they were planning a 3rd. Dominic threw himself into the work with the same intensity he'd once applied to running an empire. But this intensity was different, fueled by purpose instead of obligation, by the desire to create rather than control. He handled the business side, the fundraising, the logistics, while Lena oversaw clinical operations and patient care. They made an extraordinary team, balancing each other's strengths and covering each other's weaknesses. The past didn't disappear completely. There were still occasional threats from people who remembered what Dominic had been. Still moments when his old life reached out to touch their new one. But they faced each challenge together, and slowly, the violence faded into memory. Dominic became known not as the Vale heir, but as the philanthropist who'd funded free healthcare across 3 cities. His reputation transformed from feared to respected, and the weight he'd carried for so long finally began to lift. 3 years after their wedding, Lena stood in the main clinic on a busy Tuesday afternoon, watching Dominic interact with a young mother and her sick child. He was gentle and patient, translating medical terminology into simple language, making sure she understood the treatment plan. The woman thanked him with tears in her eyes, and Lena saw genuine peace in her husband's expression. That night, as they lay in bed in the home they'd built together, a comfortable brownstone equidistant from both clinics, Dominic pulled her close and said quietly, "I never thought I could have this. A normal life. A good life. Something worth waking up for every morning." You deserve it. You fought for it. We fought for it. He kissed her softly. Thank you, Lena, for seeing something in me worth saving, for not running when you should have, for choosing to build this with me. Thank you for being brave enough to change, for loving me enough to try. She rested her hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. We did it, Dominic. We actually did it. We built something beautiful out of all that darkness. We did, and we're going to keep building for the rest of our lives. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still hard days, still moments when the past threatened to overwhelm the present. But they faced it together, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and decided that love was worth the cost, that redemption was possible, that broken things could be remade into something stronger and more beautiful than they'd ever been before. And as Lena drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, she thought about that first night when she'd walked into her apartment to find a dangerous stranger in her living room. How terrified she'd been. How certain that nothing good could come from getting involved with someone like Dominic Vale. She'd been wrong. So wonderfully, beautifully wrong. Because from that chance encounter had come everything that mattered. Love and purpose, and the kind of partnership that survived darkness and emerged into light. They'd built a legacy not of violence and fear, but of healing and hope. And that, Lena thought, as sleep finally claimed her, was the best kind of ending there was. Not an ending at all, really. Just a new beginning for two people who'd chosen each other when the world said they shouldn't, who'd fought for something better when everyone said it was impossible, and who'd proven that love, when it was real and fierce and worth fighting for, could transform even the most broken of souls into something extraordinary. Their story didn't end with violence or tragedy or the cost of loving someone dangerous. It ended with clinic doors opening every morning, with patients receiving care they couldn't afford anywhere else, with a man who'd been a monster learning to be human again. It ended with Dominic Vale and Lena Carter choosing each other every single day and building a life worth living from the ashes of what they'd both been before. And that was more than enough.